can't thank our friends at NISA enough. And we bring in here to kick off hour number 2, the commissioner of NISA in and of itself, John Prutch. Commissioner, thanks for coming on.
Sure, John. It's good to meet you.
Going into this, I apologize ahead of time if this turns into rapid fire Q&A and things like that. I know that I have you only for a limited window. So I do want to talk about the season kickoff. I want to talk about Open Cup and obviously the 2 teams here in our footprint. So then let's start off with what you've seen so far with the clubs that are in NISA in Open Cup. There have been some successes with some folks.
Yeah, I'm actually very proud of what the Stars have done and Irvine Zeta. Zeta is a brand new club for us, and they've gotten off to a good start. So I'm very proud of both clubs.
And I know that you're looking at these clubs. I know Michigan got 2 on the board, and Justin Miram, who folks know here in the Atlanta footprint, was a part of it for Michigan. But when you talk about a club like Irvine coming out of the blocks, having that kind of instant success, what's it been like to see a franchise like that come online in your league and then instantly get markers like this?
Well, you just hope it continues, right? I think it's, they're in a great market, right? I mean, Orange County, Southern California has got a lot of talent. And I think they've really done a good job of preparing themselves for the season. They've been involved, with us through NISA Nation and now NISA for a bit. So they understand the landscape. They have a great venue. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic that they are going to be not all just off to a good start. I think they're going to continue.
When you look at the 2024 season coming into play, I know it's starting a little later than you would have liked, but when you look at the 24 season coming up here in short order, kicking off this weekend, what were some of the lessons from the 23 season from a league standpoint that you are bringing with you forward that you hope you will learn from here in the 24 season?
So if I go back in time a little bit, we had the pandemic for a couple of years and bubble tournaments. When we came out of that, the boardroom really wanted to have a national league, right? They wanted to, and it really became a burden on clubs, financial burden. If you look at the cost of travel last year, just went through the roof, and so it was a financial hurdle for our clubs. And so we decided in the off season, and we started building the model for it about a year ago, not quite 9 months ago, to do a regional play, and we're going to continue that. The clubs seem to enjoy it. They don't get to play each other, across the country in this schedule as much as they would like. But it's driven down the costs considerably. And that's a very positive move, I think. And I think as you'll see expansion going forward, we're going to try to expand those regions and maybe even add a third region over time. So I think it'll really help our clubs.
Well, and I think that what that also does, in addition to the travel component and the economic component, is that it does create those rivalries inside, for lack of a better term, conferences or divisions that are self-contained. And then you really do get the idea of determining that true champion because, hey, we didn't play the folks in the West. If we're here in the Eastern footprint, we're saying, hey, we didn't play the West until the bitter end. And so you do get the best in the East and the best in the West, or whatever your division or conference makeup is, at the end of that whole discussion at the end of a year.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And we love derbies. I think, we had a big one in Michigan for a couple of years, and it was very intense. We're going to get to see a repeat of that in the Open Cup here in a couple of weeks. But those derbies, the fans love them. And you don't have that too much in the other leagues, a little bit in MLS, obviously with Galaxy and LAFC. But I do think that because of the way we're structuring this, those derbies will really start popping up. A Savannah, Georgia FC rivalry could really start gaining some speed here, I think.
We'll get into Savannah and Georgia FC coming up in just a sec. When it comes to, you mentioned expansion. So when someone knocks on your door in that league office, they come up to the building, they literally knock on your door, or carrier pigeon or fax or email or whatever they do these days. I'm interested in being a franchise in NISA, what is the vetting process and what kind of investigation does the league do in sitting there and saying, okay, we think you'll be a good partner and a good representative of our league? What is the vetting process like at NISA when folks want to come in and be a part?
So there's a lot of in-person interviews, right? Net worth verifications, background checks, etc. But I will say that vetting is, only gets you so far, right? There are times when we bring in owners that are more than highly qualified, but it just decide that at some point it's not for them. I think, it's hard to measure the spirit of the person. Are they going to see this thing through, even though it's a very difficult road? And I like to tell people that it's the will to survive, right? And to get to the point where you can thrive. And sometimes, people are willing to do that in their core businesses, but they look at this as not necessarily their business. They look at it as a soccer club that they've always wanted to own. But it's different. I mean, it's a challenge for a lot of our owners, and so it's hard to measure that. And so we do make mistakes in that process, right? I think we're getting better, but we do make mistakes in that process.
So when Georgia Lions came knocking on your door and were announced in January, you can be as privy with comments and conversations as you wish, but when they came knocking on your door and the league did the vetting for the individuals, Veerhout, specifically Mr. Veerhout and Ms. Patel, when they came in the door, they knocked on your door, hey, we want to be a part of it, and you vetted them, what was the overall discussion? It's like, okay, this will work. What were the determining factors in saying Georgia Lions will work in Conyers at that current time in early January? What were those in question?
It was really more about, it wasn't about Patrick at all. We'd only had one or two conversations with him. It was really about Sunita. Sunita, really a quality individual. We got to know her. She is very committed to the project. She loves giving back to the community. And I think she, as it turns out, got sideswiped a little bit on this whole process. And then we ended up with some management members that were part of the Patrick deal. And so we had to jump in. And as we all know the story now, we jumped in, we had to clean house, and we had to say, we're not ready yet to play the Open Cup. We're not ready to host the interconference play that was scheduled to be in Georgia. And so we then relied on our relationships to try and build a management team there. The first person we contacted was Coach K, who I've known for a long time. And Coach then started doing his own work on vetting out people. And so I'm comfortable now. We are where we should have been, but we are where we are now, getting ready to start the season. I think we're way behind, obviously, but the people want to do it. Coach and the staff want to do it. And I think it's a long season, so it'll be a bumpy road for the first month or so. But I think once the players get comfortable with each other, and I think they'll be okay. So, but we'll see. We'll see.
Who is the owner of Georgia FC?
Yeah, technically, right now, it is still Sunita. She's still struggling because of all of this and the impact it's had on her life. We have a lot of support for her. We do have a couple of investors that are involved with the league that are helping that cause right now. But we'll make a long-term decision down the road on Sunita. But she appears to want to continue to move forward. But I will say, she was very rattled by all of this.
And with looking at the schedule right now, the release said that it's going to be in one particular stadium in the northeastern section of the city of Atlanta. There are some dates in Dalton, which is a 2-hour haul. And I know that that's Coach Kareem DeSerres, that's his home turf with North Georgia Soccer Academy. Is that the plan where it's going to be a by venued home schedule for them, or what?
No, it was a little bit of a okay, coach. We'll allow you to have a couple games up there. The intent is for it to be at Silverback, and we will play the Independent Cup games in Dalton, and we'll play a couple of the league games in Dalton. And I think that's more of a nod to Coach K and his academy, and letting his kids see what can happen if they're really dedicated to this. What'll happen next year, we'll see. But our intent is we are an Atlanta club. So
Savannah. And there have been some published reports recently where the league is helping Clovers make ends meet. What is the current status when it comes to the league's involvement with Clovers and having them as a franchise for the full season in 24?
Yeah. So I'll just correct one little thing that you said. We are involved. It's investors that we've brought in to help the situation. Let me give a little background on that.
Sure.
We started seeing some issues 6 months or so ago. The primary team owner, who is still the primary team owner, but he's out of South Africa. There were some geopolitical issues going on and moving assets or capital. And so things started to slow down, payments and stuff like that. And so in the first quarter, it became obvious to us that we were going to have to step in if we wanted Savannah to play. We love the market. We love what Brian and Jeff Defoe did there in building that club from an amateur to a pro. And we just didn't feel it was right for the market or right for that club to say, no, you can't play. Right. So we stepped in. Jeff Defoe is coming back to run the club. David Proctor, the coach, is doing an amazing job of holding it together. And again, you never want to be involved at the league level, especially with independent clubs, but sometimes you have to if you really want to make sure that club survives. And I think those three individuals, Brian, Jeff, and David, will do a good job with the club. Again, it's off to a later start. We saw in the Open Cup game the other night that, they just haven't had enough time together yet. Yeah. And that will take time. And they have a road trip tomorrow to Michigan. That ought to be a pleasure. But I think David will have them ready for the match, and we'll see, right? And there were signs in that game the other night. The talent is there, the attitude is there. There were times when you could tell that they just hadn't been together enough, right? Where they get stretched a little bit on defense and stuff. So it is what it is. But we're very pleased with the management of the club and the direction of the club.
I was going to ask, what kind of a leash length do Clovers have when it comes to searching for investors, getting those folks vetted, getting them in the barn, approved, NISA approved kind of a thing? How long of a leash are you giving Clovers so they can be a part of NISA?
Pretty long. We are working together with them. We've identified a couple of potential investors that love the market, love the club. And so over the next couple of months, a decision will be made. And by the way, one of those investors did come from the management team.
When it comes to Division I, Division II, U.S. Soccer Federation certification, so on, these kinds of things, there are certain metrics that have to be met when it comes to net worth and these kinds of things. I think for Division I, I think it's 30. If it's a consortium, lead owner's got to be 35%, and I think net worth has to be 20 million or something like that, or at least presented in paper to sit there and say, "Hey, I'm worth 20." Second division, I think it's 35%, and they've got to be worth 15. What kind of parameters are you guys looking for in NISA when it comes to someone who knocks on your door Or, I mean, is there a franchise fee that it is non-refundable when they're interested? When it comes to what you're looking for from a financial standpoint, what kind of investors are you looking for?
Yeah, so PLS for Division III is 10 million.
Okay.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole PLS, but it is pretty arbitrary.
Right.
I made a comment in another interview the other day that Division II women's net worth individual for 35%, what we call the primary team owner, is 6 million. Division III men's is 10 million. So what does that tell you, right? I mean, come on. So I think, but what we do is obviously the investor has to be worth, $10 million. To us, again, I'll go back to what I made a comment earlier. All of them are worth over $10 million.
Okay.
Some of them are worth many multiples of that, right? I mean, we do have some owners that are extremely wealthy. But again, it's never about the money, right? It's really about their mental and emotional ability to see it through. I think the other problem I have, and I've been vocal about this for a couple of years about PLS, is you cannot have a community own the club, or you cannot have a 501c3 own the club, and which is unfortunate. I like to comment that if this is the only country where Barcelona couldn't have a pro team. And it creates, there are clubs, and I'll use Chattanooga as an example down in your neck of the woods,
right?
Was community owned. I mean, basically, right? I mean, it truly was community owned, and they restructured their balance sheet to be able to qualify. So and they were able to do that. But in many cases, that's not the case. You take some of these clubs that have been around 80, 100 years in this country. Wow, that's a big ask. Right, to restructure their balance sheet so that they can have one guy be the guy, right?
Yeah.
Tough.
I can't thank you enough for coming on to discuss what's going on. It's been a difficult walk here in the off season. It still is, with a couple of franchises here in our footprint. I know that you mentioned losing Chattanooga FC to MLS Next Pro as a part of it, and having to deal with what's going on with Georgia Lions FCSC, and now Georgia, now that they're in this third incarnation in basically a 3-month period. I know that that's not ideal for what's going on there at the league office, and especially with what's also going on in Savannah. But I give you full credit for coming on and being transparent about all these kinds of things and walking folks down the road and giving us a bit of an education as to what it's like there in the league office, trying to navigate 9 franchises, keeping 8 on the board, and keeping certification and all these kinds of things. I can't thank you enough for coming on to kick off your season. I know that I wish we were talking about more stuff on the field, but I'm glad we got to talk about that in addition to the issues folks were asking here in the footprint.
Sure. Well, John, I appreciate your time. All right. Thanks. And we'll talk again.